Hello, America, and welcome to the Ryan Mack Show. I am your host, Ryan McKenzie. Today is episode 4, and it is on the history of the Democrat Party. Now, what do we know about the modern Democrat Party? Extreme, right? Hell bent on destroying our country. And they'll do anything they can to do so, legally and illegally, not using the Constitution as their backdrop. But have they always been this way? Have they always been this destructive? And it all means attacking their opposition. The answer is yes, they have. They've just found new ways to control you and to punish you and to manipulate people they have felt over time have been inferior or lesser than them. They really are evil people. Today's modern Democrat Party, you've seen it. The Biden administration weaponizes government agencies, the big tech, and businesses against their opposition. Their plans and goals have never changed. They just took on different forms and different means to end that goal. In order to understand the modern Democrat Party, we need to take a step back and look throughout their history to really understand where they come from and where they've always been. So we look at 1828 as the start of the Democrat Party. Before that, you had multiple political factions that were divided. They had common goals, but really the party started in 1828. It's the oldest of the two major parties. We look at Andrew Jackson as the father of the Democrat Party. He really is the central character in the forming of the party in the 1820s, all the way through the start of the Civil War era. He owned plantations, like many wealthy Democrats in the South back then in the 1830s. He owned slaves. And Democrats will tell you today, well, Republicans are racist and they're the party of slavery. That's just not true. No Republicans owned slaves. He's also known for his very harsh and very cruel treatment of the Native Americans. He took their land and sold it cheap and moved them to reservations. And sometimes he physically abused them, and other times he raped the women. So he stole a lot from the Native Americans. And it became, during the time, known as the Trail of Tears. And he's the prominent character in that. So then we look at him overall. He was known as the common man's president. He was the people, the common man, kind of like Joe Biden says he is lunch pail Joe. He's middle class Joe. That also is a bold-faced lie. Back then, Andrew Jackson was your typical corrupt Democrat. He opposed ending slavery, just as did the entire party through the 1850s and 1860s. They sometimes violently opposed ending slavery, too much to the point where they used to physically assault their Republican counterparts in Congress over their opposition to slavery. And when they depict slavery as the two issues, the North and the South, it really was framed incorrectly, according to Democrats. You'll hear Democrats today tell you, well, the Republicans are a party of slavery, and they're the ones who are racist, and their party was against minority rights. And again, that's just not true. Okay, anybody can read a history book. That it's not true at all. Prominent Democrats who were white owned land in the South, and primarily the South was Democrat throughout the Civil War era, and then past that up until more modern day times. But the war was framed as the pro-slavery South versus the anti-slavery North, but Northern Democrats opposed ending slavery. So it really was about pro-slavery Democrats versus anti-slavery Republicans. And the Republican Party was founded a little bit earlier, but really was started to grow under the leadership of Abraham Lincoln. And it was founded on the idea that it opposed slavery at all costs. What the black man had little, let him be, was Abraham's famous line. And it wasn't that so much of a powerful anti-slavery movement. It was such that just leave people alone. Slavery was an immoral good. immoral, negative thing. But once they couldn't win on the issue of slavery, so I'm not going to go over the huge, vast party history here because it's a lot to talk about. But I'm going to highlight several instances throughout their history as a party to see that their evil hasn't changed as its main structure. It's just slightly changed forms and ideas. So when they couldn't win this on the war, we all know the history. The Civil War ended, and the states came back to join the Union, and slavery was abolished. Well, they couldn't win. Slavery was ended. They simply moved on to the next con. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment gave citizenship. And the 15th Amendment gave the blacks the right to vote. Well, they couldn't have that, so they lost the war on slavery. Their next ploy was the Jim Crow era. And again, Democrats today will tell you that, Republicans are racist. Their laws are Jim Crow 2.0. And again, it's a bold-faced lie. The Jim Crow era laws were right after the Civil War ended, and it was Democrats who vehemently opposed the ending of slavery. They enacted laws to still stop blacks from having rights, and they instituted black codes. Some of the most prominent types were that blacks couldn't own a gun. They couldn't protect themselves. So when these white liberals came onto their properties and tried to take them from them, they had nothing to defend themselves from. So they were excluded from the Second Amendment and owning guns for protection. And that was all Democrats. When they couldn't get blacks to be under their control, they couldn't have slavery, they switched to the KKK when they formed. They formed the KKK in violent opposition to blacks gaining prominency in the South. Blacks primarily lived in the South after the war, and so they were freed. And they gained political power, and they ran on Republican ideas, which angered Southern white Democrats. So this led to violence. And you hear all the stories about lynching. They lynched so many freed slaves, and without even a proper due process. They accused, and then they killed. It was torturous. And you have to remember, these were all prominent Democrat leaders who were huge donors to the Democrat Party at the time. They did not want blacks to have any prominent role in society. They wanted segregation completely, 100% Democrats. And they were never thought of as equal. To this day, the minority party is still never thought of as equal, and you'll see that going forward. So they opposed the Reconstruction era amendments. Those amendments garnered almost zero Democrat support, and Republicans passed all three of them with very little Democrat support. So they cry about being the party of minorities. They cry about minority rights, and they're the party of freedoms. And we learn throughout history that's just not true. So 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, again, they gave rights to blacks overwhelmingly. Republicans. So don't ever let a Democrat tell you that they are the party for the people. So moving forward, they also took credit for women's suffrage. And again, they blocked and filibustered everything to do with the women's suffrage movement in the 1900s. The 19th Amendment that passed. And the only reason why it passed is because Democrats finally agreed to stop filibustering it. Republicans passed it. Woodrow Wilson era, the hatred, the racism that he displayed, and the sheer segregationist attitude he had appeared in his administration. He fired prominent black cabinet members from supervisory roles. And he justified it by saying it was a moral good to be segregated. Woodrow Wilson, Democrat. Remember this, liberals, for saying the next time you think that Republicans are racist. So they take credit for things that they never really supported throughout history, and they still do it today. They take credit for gas prices going down, when in effect that it was the Biden administration's own policies that raised them in the first place. So after none of these things they tried to block succeeded, they kept marching along. They take credit for the civil rights in the 1960s, but it was the Republicans who passed legislation through the last 100 years. And they just simply, again, blocked it without Democrat support. They use minorities, they use women for political gain, and they toss them aside. Their motives never changed. Instead of having plantations in the South, they moved to having urban plantations. They put people who immigrated here from our country into apartments and slums and made them vote Democrat. This never changed. There's more of a backside of a history with Saul Alinsky, who was a prominent scam artist and who also helped groom Obama and Hillary. But that's a whole nother topic. They don't really consider themselves Democrats as much as they were more of this movement than as progressivism. And this progress was supposed to be forward thinking. We know what's better for you. The state knows what's better for you than you do. This also was a big part of FDR's presidency. He was credited with the New Deal programs. It grew the social welfare. He grew all these poor programs that made essentially little handouts to help keep the minorities vote. And he started a lot of things that didn't help minorities at all. Other things that Democrats ran and Democrat donors funded was Planned Parenthood. Now, not many of you know this, but for those of you on the pro-choice side of the aisle who think Planned Parenthood does these great things besides abortions in their services, well, overwhelmingly, abortions are the largest portion of their care and business. And the founder, the very central idea of her founding Planned Parenthood was to rid the black race from the face of the earth. She was very racist. Her name was Margaret Sanger. She had donations pile in throughout the years under certain races being eliminated. This is the Democrat Party. This is who they are. They are racist and bigoted through and through. They hate women, they hate minorities, and they just use you for your votes. So we have this brief history of instances where they claim Republicans are racist and the party for keeping rights away from people, removing your rights. When we just see throughout history that their time here, that it's just that's not true. It's not true at all. And it's BS, and you need to call them out on it. And it's ridiculous that they continue to get away with saying that Republicans are racist. Are there racist people who are in the Republican Party? Sure. Are there racist people in this country? Yes. But again, overwhelmingly, we see over and over again, Democrats are the ones who don't like minorities. They just use them. So fast forward to today, the modern Democrat Party. When you think of the modern Democrat Party, what do you think of? You don't think of JFK. You don't think of Carter. You don't think of the mainstream Democrats, the moderates. You think of and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton. These were all progressives. They're not just Democrats, they're progressives, and they're socialists, and their intent is to control every facet of your life. And over time, their pitch, their speeches, and their fancy bill names, their goal never changed. It is the party of racism. It is the party of slavery, Jim Crow, eugenics, Planned Parenthood, and every control over your life. That's the Democrat Party. Republicans used to be the party of big business and those kinds of programs, and they don't support that anymore. They support business, but they support small businesses. They support the opportunity for capitalism and growth and economic growth through free market. And they realize that a limited government was best for America. That's the constitutional aspect of it. Republican Party has a whole history of their own with their own problems. But that's coming next week. Hint. So it's been hijacked even further to the left, moderately. The modern Democrat Party. And with those faces, like I mentioned earlier, it's become more of the climate change, the anti-American wing of the population, the socialists like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are hell-bent on taking from the rich and taxing the crap out of you, which they say it's the rich or it's not, and giving to the poor. All these social welfare programs are the same way that the Democrats tried to do in the 1860s. the 1960s, and now in the 2000s. It's no different. So today, instead of killing you and lynching you if you don't agree with them, maybe Hillary might. If I could say this now, I might not be here next week if she gets a hold of you. Whoever's associated with the Clintons. They'll cancel you. How will they cancel you? They'll shut you down on social media. They will use big tech any which way they can to delete you off platforms. They will make sure your voice is not heard. And as conservatives, we need to stand up in every which way we can and be loud and be out there. We have to combat this. If they don't use big tech to censor you, they will simply use the FBI and other agencies to come after you. And they will use the IRS to financially cripple you. So there's just some of the ways that they will continue to come after you. So going forward, we look at, when the FBI, the CIA, all these other organizations in which they try to weaponize over the years. Anyone who supports the MAGA movement as much as recently. And if you're a Trump supporter, or even if you're Trump himself, they will come after you any way they can. We saw this in other ways, such as the pandemic. They will disguise fascism and communism in simply other forms under the guise of health and safety, and it's for your own good. This modern Democrat Party hates America. They despise you and I. They hate conservatives and what we stand for. They hate your Constitution. They want to shred it, literally destroy it. And it boggles my mind that people can still vote for the Democrats. Nothing good comes from voting for Democrats. Nothing. Now, Bongino, if you listen to Dan Bongino, he has a list of golden rules. And one of his rules is that his tips, Republicans may not always be the answers to your problems, but Democrats will almost always be the cause of them. So make sure you remember that, especially when you come to vote soon. Republicans may not always have your answers, but Democrats will almost always be the cause of your problems. That's it for today. Stay tuned for next week when I give you the short, brief history of the Republican Party. And as I go forward with future podcast episodes, stay tuned, as always, The Ryan Mack Show on Facebook and wherever you get your podcast.